My boss fired me after 32 years, calling my life's work analog trash. He didn't know I wrote a poison pill into the company's core patent decades ago. So I let him walk into a Pentagon meeting using technology he no longer owned, and I watched his empire burn. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you subscribe to see it through to the end. We're always curious, where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The moment Trevor Ashford didn't shake my hand, I knew I was done. It wasn't just a breach of etiquette, it was a declaration of war, delivered with the casual indifference of a man who had never had to fight for anything in his life. I stood in the doorway of the glass-walled conference room on the 42nd floor, my hand extended in a gesture of professional courtesy that I had offered to admirals, senators, and Pentagon liaisons for 3 decades. Trevor, the 32-year-old Stanford MBA who had inherited the CEO chair 6 months ago, didn't even look up from the file open on the table before him. He just gestured vaguely at the empty leather chair opposite him, his eyes scanning the paper like he was reading a lunch menu he found disappointing. "Sit down, Nathan," he said. He didn't use my title. He didn't ask how the decrypt analysis on the Norfolk server farm was going. He just pointed a manicured finger at the seat. I sat. The chair was cold, the leather stiff. The air conditioning in the room was set to a temperature that felt less like a workspace and more like a meat locker. I folded my hands on the mahogany table, keeping my posture straight. 32 years at Iron Wall Technologies, and before that, 10 years in Navy intelligence, teaches you how to occupy space without fidgeting. You learn to be a statue when the world starts shaking. "We need to talk about the future," Trevor said, finally looking up. His smile was there, but it didn't touch his eyes. It was a shark's smile, all teeth and instinct, void of warmth. He adjusted his silk tie, a knot so perfect it looked machine-made. "I've been reviewing the personnel efficiency reports for the upcoming quarter. We're pivoting, Nathan. The board and I, we're fully committed to an AI-first strategy." I nodded slowly. "I've read the memos, Trevor. My team has already begun integrating machine learning protocols into the quantum encryption lattice. We're ahead of schedule." Trevor sighed, a theatrical sound that echoed in the quiet room. He closed the file folder of my personnel file. I realized with a jolt and pushed it an inch toward me. "See, that's the thing," he said, his voice dropping to a tone of faux sympathy that was infinitely more insulting than shouting would have been. "You're talking about integration, patchwork, putting band-aids on legacy systems. We're talking about transformation, disruption." He leaned back, tenting his fingers. "Look, Nathan, you've contributed solid work over the years. Really solid. For your time, you were the best. But frankly, your analog approach doesn't align with our digital transformation roadmap. The Navy doesn't want safe anymore. They want smart. And your methodology, it's just too rigid. Analog approach." The words hung in the air like smoke. I felt a tightening in my chest, a physical pressure pressing against my ribs. I had been writing quantum encryption algorithms since this kid was learning to tie his shoes. I had written the code that currently secured the communications for the 7th Fleet in the Pacific. I had spent nights sleeping on the floor of the server room in 2014 when a brute force attack from a foreign state actor almost compromised the grid. I wasn't just part of the system, I was the architect of the foundation he was sitting on. "My methodology," I said, my voice steady, though my pulse was hammering in my ears, "kept our client's data secure during the breach last November. It has a 0 fail rate for 2 decades, Trevor. Reliability isn't analog, it's necessary." Trevor waved his hand dismissively, as if swatting away a fly. "That's exactly what I mean. You're looking at the past. I'm looking at the Q4 projections. We need fresh eyes. We need digital natives." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a white envelope. He slid it across the mahogany table until it rested next to my hand. "Effective immediately," Trevor said. "We've prepared a severance package. It's generous considering the circumstances. We're calling it a strategic restructuring. You'll hand over your badge and laptop to HR on your way out. Security will escort you to the lobby." My hearing seemed to dampen, the hum of the building's ventilation system drowning out the ambient noise. "Security will escort you." Like I was a thief. Like I hadn't built the security protocols that the guards used to badge into the building. I looked at the envelope. I didn't reach for it. "You're firing me," I stated. 2 days before the Pentagon demonstration. "We're letting you go," Trevor corrected, his smile tightening. "And don't worry about the demo. The development team has it handled. We're moving the new build to production on Monday. We don't need the architect to paint the walls, Nathan. He checked his watch, a gold timepiece that probably cost more than my first car. The meeting was over. I was a line item he had just deleted from a spreadsheet. He expected me to beg, or to yell, or to cause a scene that would validate his decision to remove the unstable old guard. But the Navy teaches you something vital. When you take a direct hit, you don't panic. You assess damage. You check your systems. You secure your perimeter. I stood up. I didn't take the envelope. I picked up the personnel file he had left on the table my life, reduced to paper and tucked it under my arm. I understand, I said. Trevor looked disappointed. He wanted the drama. Just leave the laptop at the desk, Nathan. I turned and walked toward the glass doors. I didn't look back. I didn't slam the door. But as I stepped into the hallway, the realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. It wasn't just the job, it was the erasure. He was erasing me from the history of the company I helped build from a garage into a billion-dollar defense contractor. The betrayal cut deeper than any shrapnel I dodged in the Gulf. The walk from the executive suite to my desk was only about 200 feet, but it felt like marching across a desert. The open-plan office, usually a hive of quiet, focused energy, seemed to hold its breath as I passed. They knew. In an office like this, bad news travels faster than fiber optics. I walked past the rows of dual monitor workstations where young engineers, many of whom I had hired and trained myself, suddenly found their screens fascinating. Paul Richardson, a senior dev who used to come to my house for barbecues, picked up his phone and started talking to a dial tone just to avoid making eye contact. I reached my office, a modest corner room filled with the hum of servers and the smell of ozone. I didn't have much to pack. I wasn't the type to clutter my workspace with trinkets. There was a framed photo of my late wife, Sarah, from our trip to Maine, a stress ball shaped like a naval mine, and the team photo from 5 years ago, back when Iron Wall felt like a family and not a portfolio asset. I placed the photo of Sarah into my leather satchel. Well, kid, I thought, looking at her smiling face, looks like we're retiring earlier than we planned. I closed my laptop. The sticker on the lid read, Department of Defense, Clearance Level 5. I peeled it off slowly, leaving a sticky residue on the brushed aluminum. That machine contained the last 6 months of my work on the quantum key distribution updates. Trevor thought he was inheriting a finished product. He thought the code was just a static thing, a brick he could sell. He didn't understand that code, like ours, was a living organism. It needed care. It needed to be understood. And most importantly, it needed to be owned legally. I felt a strange, cold calm wash over me. It was the same feeling I used to get in the CIC, Combat Information Center, when the radar lit up with incoming bogeys. The panic vanished, replaced by a hyper-focused clarity. Trevor had made a mistake, a massive, catastrophic mistake. He saw me as an employee, a resource. He saw Iron Wall as a collection of assets he had inherited by birthright, but he had forgotten, or perhaps he had never bothered to learn the history of the very ground he was standing on. He assumed that because he sat in the CEO's chair, he owned everything within the walls. But he had forgotten one crucial thing. I picked up the heavy termination folder and felt the weight of it. My hand brushed against the side of my desk, my fingers tracing the hidden groove of the drawer I kept locked. Inside that drawer, beneath tax returns and old warranty papers, was a memory from 2009, a failsafe. I didn't open the drawer. I didn't need to check if it was there. I knew exactly what was in the safe at home, and I knew exactly what was in the safe at home, and I knew exactly what the document said. I slung my satchel over my shoulder. I left the laptop on the desk, closed. As I walked through the elevators, I passed the break room. The HR director, Linda, was standing by the coffee machine. She had been with the company for 15 years. She used to ask me to mentor the difficult new hires because I had the patience of a saint. Now, she studied the pattern of the floor tiles, her shoulders hunched. "Goodbye, Linda," I said softly as I passed. She flinched, looking up with wet eyes. "I'm so sorry, Nate." "You know I didn't." "I know," I said. "It's not your call." I stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the lobby. As the doors slid shut, sealing me off from the world I had built for 32 years, I didn't feel the crushing weight of despair I expected. I felt the cold, hard click of a weapon being armed. I didn't go straight home. I couldn't face the empty house yet, Instead, I drove 3 blocks to Murphy's Diner. It was a relic, much like me red vinyl booths that were cracked with age. The smell of burnt coffee and bacon grease permanently etched into the walls, and waitresses who had been working the morning shift since the Clinton administration. I slid into my usual booth in the back. Marge, a woman who could probably run a battleship better than half the admirals I knew, appeared with a pot of coffee before I even took my coat off. "You're here early, hun," she said, pouring the steaming black liquid into a chipped mug. "Pentagon folks let you out for good behavior." "Something like that," I said, wrapping my hands around the warm ceramic. "I got fired, Marge." The pot froze in midair. She looked at me, her face softening from its usual granite hardness. "Get out. After 30 years, new management," I said. "They're pivoting. Pivoting to stupidity, sounds like," she grunted. She topped off my cup. "On the house today, Nate. You sit as long as you want." I sat there for 2 hours. I didn't check my phone. I didn't look at the emails blowing up my notification bar. I just sat and thought. Ironwall hadn't always been a glass tower corporation. It started in a converted warehouse in Norfolk. I remembered the leaks in the roof. I remembered buying server racks on eBay because we couldn't afford new ones. I remembered the chaotic, desperate energy of 2009. Trevor thought he had cut off a limb. He didn't realize he had just severed the head. To understand why Trevor's arrogance was about to cost him everything, you have to understand 2009. That year was a bloodbath for defense contractors. Funding dried up, the market crashed, and Ironwall was barely a blip on the radar. We were bleeding cash. James Ashford, Trevor's father and the founder, was a brilliant engineer, but he was a terrible businessman during a crisis. He was leveraging everything just to keep the lights on: his house, his car, his marriage. I wasn't just an employee back then. I was the lifeline. I was the one who stayed late, unpaid, for 3 months straight, writing the core quantum encryption kernel that would eventually catch the Navy's eye. I missed my own anniversary dinner that year. I missed the weekend trip Sarah had planned for months. I poured myself into that code because I believed in the mission. I believed we were building something that would save lives, and because of that chaos, the legal paperwork was messy. I remembered the night clearly. It was October. Rain was lashing against the windows of a dive bar called the Anchor near the naval base. I was sitting with Rick Porter, my old buddy from my Navy cryptography days who had smartly transitioned into intellectual property law. We were 3 beers deep. I was exhausted, my eyes burning from staring at monitors for 18 hours a day. "James is frantic," I had told Rick. "He wants to file the patent for the quantum kernel immediately. He says investors need to see assets." Rick had looked at me over the rim of his glass. He was a cynical man, a trait that made him an excellent lawyer. "Nate, look at me. You wrote that code, from scratch, on your own time mostly." "It's for the company, Rick?" "The company that missed payroll last week," Rick countered. "The company that might not exist in a month?" He leaned in, his voice dropping. "Listen to me. You file the provisional patent, but you file it under your name, solely inventor. You assign the rights to Ironwall later, once the dust settles, and they actually cut you a check that doesn't bounce." "James won't like that. James doesn't need to know the specifics of the filing structure right now. He just needs the confirmation number to show the bank," Rick said. "Protect yourself, Nate. Corporate loyalty is a one-way street." So I did it. I filed the paperwork. And in the frantic blur that followed, the sudden explosion of growth, the massive Pentagon contract, the move to the new headquarters, the final assignment of rights, the transfer of ownership document got buried. It was drafted, sure. It was sitting in a digital pile somewhere, but it was never signed, never notarized, never filed with the USPTO. For 15 years, Ironwall had been operating on a handshake and a provisional license that I had granted them. A license that had specific conditions. Conditions Trevor Ashford had just violated. Trevor. The contrast between the father and the son was tragic. James had been a man of grease and grit. Trevor was a man of polish and platitudes. He had arrived at Ironwall 6 months ago, fresh from business school, wearing suits that cost more than my first year's salary. He didn't code. He didn't engineer. He optimized. I remembered a meeting 2 weeks before the firing. I was explaining a latency issue in the Pacific comms grid to the senior staff. It was a technical problem requiring a nuanced, mathematical solution. Trevor had interrupted me mid-sentence. He was checking his phone, scrolling through what looked like a real estate listing for a penthouse in Miami. "Nate, can we elevate this?" he had asked, not looking up. "I don't need the physics lesson. Just tell me how much it costs to fix and if we can outsource the patch to the vendor in Bangalore." "It's not a cost issue, Trevor," I had explained, trying to keep my patience. "It's a security architecture issue. We can't outsource this. The code has to be written in-house. It's classified level 5. He finally looked at me, and his eyes were cold. "Everything is a cost issue, Nathan. You engineers fall in love with the problem. I'm interested in the margin. If you can't simplify it, you don't understand it." That was Trevor. He viewed expertise as inefficiency. He viewed loyalty as a liability. He was surrounded by a court of yes-men, young vice presidents who echoed his buzzwords and validated his belief that he was the smartest person in the room because his last name was on the building. He had spent the last 6 months systematically pushing out the veterans, the chief of operations gone in May, the head of QA forced into early retirement in June. I was the last pillar standing, the last reminder that Iron Wall was built on engineering, not marketing. He thought he was cleaning house. He thought he was scraping off the barnacles to make the ship go faster. He didn't realize that I wasn't a barnacle. I was the keel. And now, sitting in Murphy's diner, watching the steam rise from my coffee, I realized the clock was already ticking. The landmine Rick had helped me bury in the licensing agreement had a trigger. In the event of involuntary termination without cause, I took a sip of the bitter coffee. It tasted like fuel. It tasted like justice. I paid Murphy in cash, leaving a $20 tip on a $5 coffee bill. Marge nodded at me, a silent gesture of solidarity. I walked a couple of blocks to clear my head, letting the crisp autumn air bite at my face. I didn't call an Uber. I hailed a real yellow cab, the kind I used to take back when Iron Wall couldn't afford employee parking passes, and I had to find street spots 6 blocks away. The ride home was a blur of concrete and red brake lights. My phone buzzed incessantly in my pocket. Slack notifications, emails, text messages. I ignored them all. The silence I was maintaining was tactical. In the Navy, when you go dark, the enemy starts to guess. And when they guess, they make mistakes. My house was a modest craftsman in the suburbs, bought 20 years ago. It smelled like old leather, floor wax, and dog food. As soon as the key turned in the lock, the clicking of claws on hardwood announced the arrival of the only welcoming committee I needed. Rex, my 7-year-old golden retriever, trotted into the hallway. He was a certified therapy animal, trained to help with the PTSD I'd brought back from the Gulf. He stopped a few feet away, his tail giving a low, hesitant wag. He looked at me, then at the box under my arm, then back at my face. Dogs know. They sense the shift in atmospheric pressure when a storm is coming, and they sense the shift in a man's soul when his world has just collapsed. "It's just us today, buddy," I murmured, dropping my keys in the bowl. I walked into the kitchen and set the termination folder on the table. I went to the cabinet above the fridge and pulled down the bottle of Pappy Van Winkle bourbon Sarah had given me for our 20th anniversary. I had been saving it for my retirement. "Well," I said to the empty room, "I guess I am retired." I poured 3 fingers. The amber liquid looked like liquid fire in the afternoon light. I took a sip, letting the burn settle my nerves, and then I walked to the study. It was time to open the safe. I hadn't touched the floor safe in the corner of the closet in years. It was buried under a pile of winter blankets and old tax returns. I shoved the blankets aside, kneeling on the floor. My knees popped, another reminder that I was analog in a digital world. I spun the dial, right to 10, Sarah's birthday. Left to 24, my enlistment date. Right to 89, the year Iron Wall was founded. The handle clicked. The heavy steel door swung open with a groan. Inside, past the passports and the emergency cash, was a manila envelope. It had no label, just the thick, textured feel of expensive legal paper. It was sealed with a wax stamp that had cracked with age. I carried it to the desk, sat down, and slit the top open with a letter opener. I pulled out the document. Provisional Patent Application Number 10-23-44-7 Patent Application Number 23-4710. Filed October 15, 2009. I scanned the text. It was dense legalese, the kind of language designed to make eyes glaze over. But my eyes locked onto Section 14, Subsection C, the Rick Porter Special. In the event that the primary inventor, Nathaniel Brooks, is involuntarily terminated from employment with the assignee, Ironwall Technologies, without just cause, as defined in Section 4, all rights, titles, and interests in the intellectual property described herein shall automatically revert to the inventor, effective 5 business days following the date of termination notice. I read it again. Then a third time, automatic reversion, I whispered. I picked up my phone. It was time to break radio silence. I dialed Rick. He was a partner at a major IP firm in D.C. now, but back in the day, he was just a lieutenant who could drink me under the table. Brooks, he answered on the second ring. No hello, just a name. I heard. News travels fast. The defense sector is a small village, Nate. Everyone knows. Trevor is calling it a strategic pivot. Everyone else is calling it a strategic pivot. Everyone else is calling it a suicide pact. I'm looking at the document, Rick. The 2009 filing. There was a pause on the line. I could hear the rustle of papers, the click of a keyboard. Rick was already moving. Section 14C? Rick asked. Section 14C. I pulled the file from my archives 10 minutes ago, Rick said, his voice dropping to that low, serious rumble I remembered from our briefing days. I wanted to check if my memory was failing me. It wasn't. We never filed the final assignment of rights, Nate. James was too cheap to pay for the follow-up filing fees back then, and then we all just forgot. Does it hold up? I asked. It's been 15 years. It holds up, Rick said, the conviction in his voice absolute. Ironwall has been operating under a conditional license granted by that provisional document. The condition for the license was your continued employment. Trevor just broke the condition. So, on Monday, 5 business days from today, Rick finished for me, you don't just own the code, Nate, you own the foundation, the walls, the roof. If they run that system on Monday without your permission, they are committing willful patent infringement on a massive scale. And given that they have government contracts, it's fraud, I said. It's nuclear, Rick corrected. Are you sure you want to do this? You could just leverage this for a bigger settlement. Walk away with a few million quietly. I looked at the picture of Sarah on my desk. I looked at the termination folder Trevor had tossed at me like garbage. I thought about the analog comment. He didn't just fire me, Rick. He erased me. He humiliated my team. So we burn it down? No, I said, leaning back in my chair, the old leather creaking. We don't burn it down. We let them light the match. Then we sue them for the ashes. The next 3 days were an exercise in disciplined patience. I spent them gardening. I raked leaves in the backyard with a meticulous intensity, clearing the lawn until it was pristine. I took Rex for long walks along the river. I didn't log into LinkedIn. I didn't answer the panicked texts from Paul Richardson asking if I knew the password to the legacy admin root. I did, but he could figure it out. I was a ghost. Monday morning arrived with a gray, overcast sky. The Pentagon demo was scheduled for 1400 hours. At 0900, I sat down at my personal computer. I opened the browser and navigated to the United States Patent and Trademark Office portal. I logged in using my inventor credentials I hadn't used in a decade. There it was, the status of patent, 2002-34, 5782-34. I uploaded the scanned termination letter Trevor had given me. I filled out the notification of rights reversion form. It was a simple digital document, really. A few checkboxes, a signature. My finger hovered over the submit button. This was the point of no return. Once I clicked this, the USPTO database would update. It would flag the patent as disputed/reverted. Automated scrapers used by legal firms would pick it up within minutes. For the analog guys, I muttered. I clicked. Submission receive. Database updated. I didn't have to wait long for the shockwave. I wasn't in the Ironwall building, but I didn't need to be. I had my sources, and I knew the rhythm of that place better than I knew my own heartbeat. I knew exactly how it would unfold. Around 10:30 a.m., a young paralegal, let's call him Jason, would be doing the mandatory clearance check before the big presentation. It was a formality, a box-ticking exercise to ensure all IP in the presentation deck was clean. Jason probably had his coffee, his headphones on, scrolling through the list. He would type in the patent number for the encryption core, expecting to see assignee, Ironwall Technologies. Instead, he saw owner, Nathaniel Brooks. Status, active. Rights, reverted today. I can imagine the blood draining from his face. I can imagine him refreshing the page once, twice, 3 times, praying it was a glitch. Then, the frantic walk to the general counsel's office. At 11:15 a.m., my phone rang. It wasn't Rick. It wasn't Paul. It was the main switchboard at Ironwall. I let it go to voicemail. 2 minutes later, it rang again. This time, it was Trevor's executive assistant, a nice woman named Brenda, who used to send me Christmas cards. I let it go to voicemail. At 11:45 a.m., my personal email pinged. Subject: You are Jeant. Clarification. Need from legal@ironwall.tech. Mr. Brooks, we have noticed a discrepancy in the USPTO database regarding the encryption architecture patent. We believe this is a clerical error triggered by your departure. Please contact us immediately to sign a remedial waiver so we can correct the record before the 2 p.m. demonstration. I laughed out loud. A remedial waiver. They wanted me to sign away a billion-dollar asset because they made a clerical error. I typed a reply. I didn't send it to legal. I sent it directly to Trevor, copying the general counsel and the board of directors. To Trevor Ashford, subject: We, clerical error. Trevor, there is no error. Per the terms of my original 2009 filing, specifically Section 14C, ownership of the encryption core reverted to me this morning at 0900 hours following my termination without cause. You are currently in possession of unlicensed intellectual property. Any use, display, or demonstration of this technology is strictly prohibited. Regards, Nathan Brooks, the analog guy I hit send. I could almost feel the vibration of the explosion from 5 miles away. Inside the executive suite, the scene must have been chaotic. Later, Paul told me that he saw the general counsel sprint down the hallway toward Trevor's office. But here is where Trevor sealed his fate. Instead of stopping, instead of calling the Pentagon and rescheduling, instead of begging me for a meeting, he doubled down. According to Paul, Trevor threw a fit. He yelled that I was bluffing. He told the lawyers that a piece of paper from 2009 doesn't override corporate sovereignty. He used words like nuisance claim and strong-arm tactics. He was terrified of the board finding out he had lost the company's crown jewel. So he decided to lie. He told his team, ignore it. It's a glitch. We fix it tomorrow. Today, we demo. He decided to gamble his entire career on the hope that the Pentagon wouldn't check the USPTO database in the next 2 hours. He forgot that the Pentagon is the government. They check everything. The hour leading up to the demo was the longest of my life. I sat in my study, monitoring the inbox. At 12:30 p.m., I received a text from an unknown number. They are proceeding with the demo. Trevor told the dev team to hard-code a bypass if the license check fails. He's telling everyone you're trying to blackmail the company. Be careful. I knew it was Paul. Moyle terrified Paul. Trevor was digging his grave deeper. By ordering a bypass of the license check, he was moving from accidental infringement to criminal circumvention of digital rights management. He was turning a civil lawsuit into a federal crime. At 1 p.m., my phone rang again. This time, the ID made my breath itch. James Ashford, the founder, the man who hired me, the man whose son was currently driving the bus off a cliff. I stared at the screen. I had loyalty to James. He had given me a chance when I was fresh out of the Navy, but he had also stepped back. He had let the suits take over. He had handed the keys to his son and looked the other way while the culture rotted. I picked up. Nate, James's voice was gravelly, aged. He sounded tired. I'm looking at an email from the board. They're asking why you're CC'd on a legal threat. It's not a threat, James, I said, my voice calm. It's a fact. Trevor says you're disgruntled. Says you're trying to sabotage the launch because we let you go. We, I asked. Did you know, James? Did you sign off on firing me? There was a silence on the line, a heavy, guilty silence. I don't run day-to-day anymore, Nate. You know that. Trevor said we needed modernization. So you let him fire me. It's business, Nate. Yes, I said. It is. And so is this. Did you check the patent, James? The one from 2009? The one you were too broke to finalize? I assumed legal handled it. They didn't. I own it, James. I own the encryption core. I own the card that secures the 7th Fleet. And in 1 hour, your son is going to walk onto a stage and try to sell my property to the Department of Defense. Nate, James's voice rose, panic finally setting in. If you do this, if you let him walk out there, it will destroy the company's credibility. It will ruin us. I didn't do this, James, I said, feeling a pang of sadness but squashing it instantly. You did. When you put a child in the captain's chair and walked away. Nate, please, tell me what you want. We can fix this. I can call the demo off. It's too late for that, I said. The filing is public. The Pentagon liaisons already have the alerts. If Trevor cancels now, he admits incompetence. If he proceeds, he admits fraud. He's in checkmate, James. He just doesn't know it yet. You're going to destroy him? James whispered. No, I said, looking at the clock. It was 1:45 p.m. I'm just going to let him speak. I hung up. I turned to my computer. I had one more card to play. I opened a secure channel to a contact I had at the Pentagon's procurement office, a woman named Colonel Vance. We had worked together on the original implementation years ago. I attached 2 documents, the USPTO confirmation of my ownership and a time-stamped log of Trevor's order to bypass the license check, courtesy of Paul's anonymous tip. I typed a short message, Colonel, for your situational awareness regarding the 1400 presentation. The vendor does not hold valid title to the technology being demonstrated. Proceed with caution. And double licorice. I hit send. The trap was sprung. The cage was locked. And Trevor was walking right into the center of the ring, smiling that shark smile, completely unaware that the ground beneath him had already turned to quicksand. I didn't need a front row seat to watch the execution. I had something better, a secure login to the internal town hall livestream. Iron Wall, in its infinite corporate vanity, broadcast every major external presentation to the entire company to foster a culture of shared victory. They had revoked my email access, my building badge, and my server rights, but they hadn't revoked the hard-coded admin backdoor I'd built into the video streaming server back in 2018 for debugging bandwidth issues. Analog approach, I muttered, typing the IP address into my browser. The feed loaded in high definition. The venue was a conference hall in Arlington, just a few miles from the Pentagon. It was the kind of room designed to intimidate, brushed steel walls, recessed lighting that eliminated shadows, and a 40-foot LED wall that currently displayed the Iron Wall logo pulsating in a slow, hypnotic rhythm. The audience was a sea of uniforms and expensive suits. I spotted Colonel Vance in the second row, her posture rigid, a tablet resting on her knee. Beside her sat the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition. This wasn't just a sales pitch, it was a coronation. Trevor was asking for a 10-year contract renewal worth nearly $2 billion. The lights dimmed. The music swelled, a Hans Zimmer knockoff score meant to evoke heroism and cutting-edge tech. Trevor walked onto the stage. I had to give him credit. He looked the part. He wore a navy suit that fit him like a second skin. He walked with a bounce, a youthful energy that screamed innovation. He didn't use a podium. He wore a headset microphone, pacing the stage like he was giving a TED Talk. Ladies and gentlemen, Trevor began, his voice smooth, projected perfectly through the surround sound. For 30 years, Iron Wall has protected this nation's secrets. But the enemy has changed. The threats are no longer static. They are dynamic. They are dynamic. They are AI-driven. He paused for effect. The screen behind him shifted to a graphic of a digital globe being swarmed by red dots. The old ways, Trevor said, emphasizing the word with a grimace, the analog ways of static encryption. They are dead. Today, we introduce the future. The Iron Wall Quantum Native Lattice. I took a sip of my bourbon. That's my name for it, you thief, I said to the screen. Trevor gestured, and the screen shifted to a live view of the software interface. It was sleek, modern, and built entirely on top of the back-end architecture I had finalized 3 months ago. This system, Trevor continued, is proprietary. It is unique, and it is fully owned and operated by Iron Wall Technologies. That was the trigger. I watched Colonel Vance look down at her tablet. Her screen lit up. She swiped once, twice. Then she leaned over and whispered something to the Undersecretary. The Undersecretary frowned. He put on his reading glasses and looked at the tablet. Trevor was still talking, unaware of the ripple moving through the front row. We are ready to deploy this globally within 48 hours. No licensing delays, no third-party dependencies. The Undersecretary raised a hand. It wasn't a polite gesture, it was a command. Trevor faltered. He stopped mid-sentence, his smile flickering. I'm sorry, Mr. Secretary. We have a Q&A section scheduled for the end. Mr. Ashford, the undersecretary said. He didn't shout, but the room's acoustics carried his voice clearly. I'm looking at a notification from the U.S. Patent Office that was just forwarded to my office. The room went dead silent. You could hear the hum of the cooling fans and the projectors. I'm sorry? Trevor laughed nervously. The USPTO? We have a robust patent portfolio, sir. I can have my legal team send over This notification, the undersecretary interrupted, standing up, indicates that the core intellectual property for this quantum native lattice, specifically patent 10,234 410s remained 7 dies, under 34 bytes this morning. Trevor froze. He looked like a deer caught in the headlights of a semi-truck. He looked toward the wings of the stage, searching for his general counsel. I saw movement in the shadows. His lawyer was frantically typing on a phone, looking pale. There must be a mistake, Trevor stammered. A clerical error. We own everything. The record lists the owner as a Mr. Nathaniel Brooks, the undersecretary read. He looked up over his glasses. Is Mr. Brooks employed by Ironwall? Trevor opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He swallowed hard. Mr. Brooks was part of the team. He is no longer with the company. So you are demonstrating technology that belongs to a private citizen? Colonel Vance spoke up now, her voice sharp. Mr. Ursel? Ashford, are you aware that demonstrating unlicensed technology for a DoD contract bid is a violation of Federal Acquisition Regulation 27.4? It's not unlicensed. Trevor's voice cracked. The cool CEO facade was melting, revealing the panicked child underneath. We have an implied license. It's a technicality. We can fix the paperwork. It gets worse, Colonel Vance said. She stood up, holding her tablet like a weapon. My office just received a log file. It appears that 40 minutes ago, a command was executed on your server to bypass the license verification protocol, a command authorized by your executive login. The gasp in the room was audible. That was the kill shot. A patent dispute is a lawsuit. A deliberate bypass of security protocols to hide that dispute, that's fraud. That's debarment from government contracts. That's prison time if the DOJ gets bored. That's a lie, Trevor shouted. He was sweating now, visible even on the low-res stream. I told them to ensure stability. I didn't say to cut the feed, the undersecretary ordered. This demonstration is terminated. Colonel, secure the logs. Wait, Trevor pleaded, stepping to the edge of the stage. Please, we can explain. It's just one disgruntled employee. The tech works. The screen behind him went black. The house lights came up, harsh and unforgiving. I saw security moving toward the stage. I saw the investors in the back row pulling out their phones, frantically selling stock. I saw Trevor Ashford, the boy king, standing alone in the center of the wreckage he had created, looking small. I closed my laptop. The silence in my house was heavy, but it was lonely. It was the peaceful silence of a job finished. I looked down at Rex. He was sleeping soundly, his paws twitching in a dream. Good boy, I whispered. We got him. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. By the time the markets closed that afternoon, Ironwall stock had plummeted 40%. The headlines were brutal. Defense giant caught in IP scandal. Ironwall CEO accused of fraud at Pentagon demo. The billion-dollar clerical error. I didn't answer my phone for 2 days. I let the voicemail box fill up. I let the emails stack up into the thousands. On Wednesday morning, a black town car pulled into my driveway. I was sitting on the porch, drinking coffee. I watched as the back door opened and James Ashford stepped out. He looked 10 years older than he had on the phone. He was walking with a cane I hadn't seen before. He walked up the driveway slowly. He didn't look at the pristine lawn I had raked. He looked only at me. He stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. Nate, he said. James, can I come up? I gestured to the empty rocking chair beside me. It's a free country, unless you're trying to demo my software. James winced. He climbed the steps and sank into the chair with a heavy sigh. We sat in silence for a long time, watching the wind rustle the maple trees. Trevor is out, James said finally. Board voted last night, effective immediately. He's facing an SEC investigation, possible criminal charges for the license bypass. I warned you, I said softly. I told you he didn't understand what he was holding. I know. James rubbed his face with a shaking hand. I got lazy, Nate. I got rich, and I got lazy. I thought the company could run on autopilot. I thought Trevor could learn on the job. You can't learn integrity on the job, James. You either bring it with you or you don't. James nodded. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. He placed it on the small table between us. We're dead in the water, Nate. The Pentagon has suspended our vendor status pending an IP audit. The stock is in freefall. If we don't fix this, Iron Wall is gone. 3,000 people lose their jobs. Good people. People you hired. I looked at the envelope. What's this? A blank check, James said, and a contract. Name your price. License the patent back to us, please. Save the company. I picked up the envelope. I didn't open it. I tapped it against my knee, thinking. I thought about Paul Richardson and the dev team. I thought about the work we did, work that actually kept sailors safe. I thought about the 32 years of my life I had poured into those walls. I don't want a check, I said. James looked up, surprised. Then what? I want the company, I said. James stared at me. Not all of it, I clarified. I don't want to be CEO. I don't want to deal with the SEC or the press, but I want control of the technology. I want the position of Chief Technology Officer, permanently. I want a seat on the board with veto power over any technical roadmap decisions. I leaned forward, and I want a public apology. From you and from the board, stating clearly that the technology was developed by me and that my termination was a mistake. James looked at me. He saw the resolve in my eyes. He saw the man who had stayed late in 2009 when everyone else went home. Done, James said. Is that it? One more thing, I said, smiling for the first time in weeks. The analog department. The what? I want a new division, dedicated to legacy stability and long-term architecture. No AI, no buzzwords, just solid, unbreakable code, and I want to hire back every single veteran engineer Trevor fired in the last 6 months to run it. James let out a breath that sounded like a laugh. You want to rebuild the old guard. I want to rebuild the foundation, I corrected, because clearly you can't build a skyscraper without one. James extended his hand. Welcome back, Nate. I shook it. 6 months later, things are different. Iron Wall is smaller now, but we're stronger. The stock is stabilized. The Pentagon audit cleared us after I personally walked Colonel Vance through the code repository and showed her the valid license agreement I had signed with the new board. Trevor is gone. Rumor has it he's trying to launch a crypto startup in Austin. I wish his investors luck. They're going to need it. I'm back in my corner office. It's not as quiet as my house, but I like the hum of the servers. I have my team back. Paul is leading the new foundational systems unit. The atmosphere in the office has changed. The fear is gone. The young engineers don't look at us like dinosaurs anymore. They look at us like wizards who know spells they haven't learned yet. I was walking through the lobby yesterday when I saw a new hire, a kid fresh out of MIT, struggling with a server rack in the staging area. He was getting frustrated, trying to force a connection that wasn't lining up. I stopped. Easy, I said. Don't force it. You have to feel the click. The kid looked up, sweaty and annoyed. I know how to do it. It's just old hardware. Analog junk. I smiled. I didn't get angry. I just patted him on the shoulder. Be careful with the analog junk, son, I said, walking toward the elevators. It bites back. I walked into my office and closed the door. Rex was sleeping on his new orthopedic bed in the corner. I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, my own laptop, and looked at the code scrolling down the screen. It was clean. It was secure. It was mine. And for the first time in a long time, the future looked bright.